Hi guys, this is going to be a fun kind of sewing tutorial that's a little bit different than my previous sewing videos. So I recently purchased this jumper off of eBay. I'm a big fan of corduroy, and I thought this is a corduroy that is just gonna have lots of wear in it. It looks like it's in really good condition. It's thick, so it's gonna be kind of warm if I'm just hanging around the house and not doing much at all. I do not recognize this brand, but that's not always my deciding factor when I'm doing a purchase off of eBay. And even though it's yellow and bright, I thought it just needs something else. Because the yellow is just really it's really bright, and your eyes don't really have anywhere to go. So I thought it would be fun just to embellish it a little bit with some pretty flowers and butterflies. So I grabbed some fabric out of my stash, and I thought kind of the pattern, and it's kind of off center, would be kind of fun to do. So I thought this would be a super fun kind of quilting kind of embellishment here. So these are the dimensions that I'm working with. The pockets are actually quite large. They're about 7 inches across. And the area that I wanted to quilt is about 5 inches or so. I didn't want to do the whole thing, just a square, just a big square of the area. So what I cut out is about 14 inches across and about 5 inches down. And that's the entire fabric that I'm using, and I just cut it in half. So for each pocket, the bottom layer is about 1 inch, and exposed it's about 2.5 inches for the middle. So what I mostly wanted to show in this quilting block was the butterflies. That's kind of where I'm hoping that the eyes will kind of go, is on the butterflies. So I wanted to use the green and the yellow to kind of just accent the beautiful colors in the butterfly. So I'm using these clips to kind of get all of the pieces in place to make sure they don't move around. And then I'm using my straight pins to actually adhere the green and the yellow to the main fabric pattern there. So with quilting, one of the big tasks is just to make sure everything is going to stay put. Make sure, after you measure it, that you don't have to re-measure it. So all you're focusing on is the sewing portion once you've got everything laid out correctly. And when you're pinning, just really be sure that everything is where you want it to be before you actually start the sewing. So do take a little bit of a time. What did the carpenter say? To measure twice, measure your thing twice and then cut once. That's kind of the same thing that I think about when I'm sewing. Is just, make sure it's exactly the way you want it to be before you actually start sewing. You can, always take out your threads and get out your seam ripper, but I'd rather not do that. Let's just make sure everything is exactly the way we want it to be before we even start the sewing portion. So for the actual sewing, this is what I'm doing is sewing up the back side of the quilted square or panel. I figure I don't want all of my stitches to be visible. I want it to be a very invisible kind of stitching. So this is the back side, and what I'm doing is snagging the green material, just a few layers there, and then pulling it through on the butterfly area. So, and then I'm just flipping it over just to make sure the stitching is not visible. So I've got a couple of layers of material of the green, so we can easily put our needle through at least one layer there without any of the stitching even showing through. So because this is a back end, it doesn't need to be super pretty. The thing I really just want to make sure is that it looks nice on the other side. So you can make the stitches, you know, as small as you want or as big as you want, and your stitches don't have to be beautiful. So this is a neat project if you're a beginning sewer. So it's going to look really nice on the outside, and it doesn't have to be pretty on the back end of things at all. So it's a good way to practice your stitching, and nobody needs to know how experienced you are. So this is stitching up the yellow fabric to the butterfly portion. It's basically the very same methodology that we just did. We're just doing some stitching to adhere the yellow to the butterflies. And we've got a couple of layers on the yellow fabric, so we can easily just put our needle through one layer. And it's just going to look really nice on the other side. All right, so we've got all of our stitching done with the yellow and the green. And everything is in place, and it looks really beautiful on the front, so feeling really good about the project. So now we just need to do some stitching on the ends. So I'm just going to fold down the material. And you can use your scissors and even up the material if you want to, but it doesn't really matter because everything's on the back end of things. So from the front, nobody's really going to see. Just make sure that it's your ends are even and they look really nice. I'm not even measuring. They don't need to be perfect. Just kind of eyeballing them. Make sure it looks even before we actually start the sewing portion of it. So we've got all of our clips in place, and from the front it's looking pretty good. And I'm just scooting those clips around just so I have some room to work. And the stitching is going to be very similar to what we've already done. We're just going to do some stitching through about one layer of the material, so none of these stitches are going to be visible on the other side of things. And this stitching is basically just to keep all the material in place. You know, we haven't even started adhering, stitching up the quilted square to the main jumper. So this is just to make sure our fabric isn't going to move around on us, that it's gonna stay put, and it doesn't have to be really secure. It just has to kind of stay in place long enough for us to actually do the stitching to the actual garment. So do keep that in mind. What we're doing is just kind of making sure everything stays the way it should stay, as we're working through this project. And there's a little more stitching that we're still gonna do on the quilted square, really to keep everything in place, just to make sure everything wears okay when we're actually wearing our garment. So there are a lot of clips, you know, and your thread is probably going to get caught. So just be really patient. I think the most important thing is just to make sure all of your fabric really stays put, so it'll be pretty while we're stitching it up. So do it slow and careful, and don't get too frustrated if things get snagged along the way. All right, so we've got our quilted square. Everything is pretty on the back end. Well, not pretty. It's got some ugly stitches on the back end, but everything is going to stay in place, and that is what I was looking for. So on the front end, we're not seeing any stitches, but I want to do a little more stitching on the front just to make sure everything stays put, because this is the area that's going to be exposed. Things that might get snagged, you know, I'm going to be using the pockets. They're gonna be going through the wash. So definitely a little more stitching just to make sure it's really secure. So these portions of fabric don't get snagged on things, and so it'll just stay really pretty. So again, like the work that I did on the back end, we've got about a layer of material that we can use to put our needle through, so it'll stay secure, and it won't even show through on the other side. So it'll just be kind of invisible for people that are looking at our quilted square from the outside, and nobody has to know how much stitching we actually did to to make all of this look so pretty and beautiful. All right, and I have just pinned the quilted square onto the jumper. So I've got everything in place. It looks pretty even. And so now we're just going to do a little bit of stitching just to adhere the quilted square to the jumper. And you want to make sure that your stitches are pretty solid, just to make sure that the quilted patch is not gonna come loose from your jumper. So just make sure you've got some pretty strong stitches. And the color of thread that I chose is a bright yellow, which matches the jumper. So it should be pretty invisible, even if somebody happens to see some of the stitching. It should kind of blend into the jumper pretty well. So what I'm doing is just some very tiny little stitches. I want to make sure I've got lots of stitches, just so they're really secure. They're going to be strong. I'm going to not need to redo any of my stitches. And here is the finished jumper with my quilted pockets. And I'm just so happy how this turned out. I think the colors are really fun, and I think it'll be something that I will enjoy wearing for a very long time. And I think the quilted pockets just make it a little more fun and interesting, rather than just a big bright yellow jumper. Thank you everybody for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I hope you have a great day.